Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. It's been a while since I've done any interviews, and no other than one of my good friends, James Lynch, who does a lot of the MMA media, who's been one of the better ones over the years here. I feel like he's very underrated and doesn't get enough shine like he should, but he is great. You can always check out his social media platforms. I'll put that down in the link in the bio. But James, it is great to see you as always. And how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I was really happy when you sent me the invite. It's a good chance for you and I to catch up, and I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no worries. No, I appreciate you taking the time out. And the first question I want to start is to you is let's talk a little bit about how you got into doing MMA media full time. Is this something that just came out of nowhere? Have you always been more of that, or you've been doing play by play? Why, or how did this start for you?
So it started for me in university. I was going to school for like communications. I always wanted to be in broadcasting. I wanted to be like a reporter, TV guy, sports reporter. That was always the goal, but it was with hockey. Hockey's my first love. It's always going to be my first love. Grew up playing hockey. I live in Canada. It's kind of like mandatory if you live here. So that was kind of the goal. But then I really got into the UFC when the first season of The Ultimate Fighter came about. I remember watching it in college and being like, this is so cool. And like I was a big pro wrestling fan back in like the Attitude Era for a couple of years, and I kind of saw like similarities in terms of like, you gravitated towards certain fighters. So I remember like watching Diego Sanchez in The Ultimate Fighter, and Josh Koscheck and Chris Lieben and all these names, and so I kind of got hooked on that sport, and then I basically saw it as kind of like a niche thing to get into. And I always sort of kept tabs on it. And I kind of made a decision kind of early on that I wanted to pursue like covering MMA like as an actual like profession. So it just so happened at the time I was living in Toronto, and they had the Fight Network go the TV network there. And I applied for an internship, and I ended up getting it. And I knew a friend from college that worked there. And so I was working like immediately as an intern, like under like Mauro Ranallo and like John Pollock and all these like great names like John Ramdian, who does commentary for Unified now. So I was really lucky like early on to be like exposed to these like really like great people in the industry. And then after I left Fight Network after a couple of years, I was always doing MMA like on the side on top of like the day job, because like Fight Network was great, but wasn't really paying my bills. It was more like a fun thing to do, like that I was trying to get into. And so I just started doing like fighter interviews on the side for a site called MMA Oddsbreaker. And I was holding a day job while that was all going on. And then fast forward to like 2017, I became a dad, and I couldn't do both because I would come home after work and I would do these interviews and I would make an extra money on the side. And then, when I became a father, there was no way that I could do both because I obviously had to do my parental duties and all that. So I kind of made the decision where I was talking with my wife. I was like, I don't know if I want to leave this. Like things are going well. Like I was at the time, I think before I had was kind of making my decision. I was working with MMA Oddsbreaker and Flow Combat and a few other companies. And I just made the decision. I was like, look, I could probably make this work. Like if I quit my job, and could probably make like decent money, like at least enough for us to get by for now. So I did that. I quit my corporate job in 2017 in October, and went and did this full time and just worked for a bunch of different outlets. And the rest is history, as they say. And now, I mean, interviews do pretty much pay like the majority of my income right now, but I'm doing a lot of other different stuff. I do some producing. I do some NFL content as well. I'm not even like a big NFL guy, but I work for a company called Fantasy Life doing their NFL shows. So a little bit of everything, but still doing a lot of MMA interviews. That's kind of my bread and butter. So that's the long version of what you asked me there. So
No, that's great. And I see you have a channel with Chris Cyborg as well. Do you do a little bit
so
with Chris?
I do. I do. I host a show with Chris Cyborg on her
Okay.
YouTube channel. That's what I have to do right after this. So I have I do like a 10 to 15 minute show with her every week, kind of it's called The Catch Up, but it's just basically like an update show where we like talk about what Chris is up to and like talk about like the news. And it's been great. I'm surprised it's kind of gone on this long. It's been going on for a couple of years now, which is fine by me. I love doing it. And for Chris, it's helping her, improve her interview skills and her English and all that. And for me, it's just like I get to talk to one of the best fighters of all time, like every week. It's pretty awesome. So even myself, I'm kind of like, wow, I can't believe I get to do this. So
There's probably a lot to talk about, especially now with Bellator going over to the PFL and
yeah.
her kind of seeming a little unhappy now because not getting invited to last week's event.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And that was when Chris is one of their poster women, as we can say now, and one of the pioneers of women's MMA, obviously. I knew for years that no one wanted to fight her. Nobody wanted to fight her for that many years. But no, that's awesome, man. Well, I'll put that down in the link as well in the bio so everyone can check it out too. But what are some tips that you could give to someone that is just getting into this and all they have is an iPhone, they don't have a mic, they're trying to build connections, but they're struggling a little bit with building the connections with some local fighters, local gyms. How could you get started? How would you say to get started with that then?
Well, you can get started right away if you have an iPhone. I mean, nowadays iPhones, the cameras on the iPhones are just as good as some of the DSLR cameras, like the ones that I'm using that I'm using here today. I get asked this a lot. I have a couple of videos on my channel. I'll if anyone is watching this and wants to check it out, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. I have a tutorial and advice playlist. Just because I do get asked this a lot, and it's just easier if I do like one video and I can kind of answer the same question over and over. But I'll kind of summarize it in here, and that is just figure out what you want to do. Like for me, I always knew I wanted to be on camera and interview fighters. Like I've done like some play-by-play, I've done some writing, but always at the end of the day, it's always been about interviewing the fighters. So that first and foremost is what really caught my interest in something that I wanted to do. So when I started out, I focused a lot on regional fighters, and I know you're the same way. I know you've been done tons of great work over at Rufus Sport, and we've talked about this over the years. And I think that's such a good strategy to have because especially when you're going to the gyms, like you can really get the fighters in their element, right? It's not like going to like a UFC media day. But if you're looking to start and you like, let's assume that you do want to do interviews. Well, where I would start is I would start looking up some of the upcoming LFA cards or Invicta or these cards that don't get enough coverage and not focus so much on the UFC. You can still do UFC content if you want, but that shouldn't be your bread and butter in terms of how you want to go about covering the sport. Because I always tell this to people, like, who are you going to watch? Are you going to watch a UFC preview that some small channel does? Or are you going to watch the UFC preview that say like, MMA Junkie does, or like some big outlet, like really like you're at competition with them? Now, is MMA Junkie or MMA Fighting, are they going to be interviewing like an Invicta prelim fighter? Probably not. Like, and it's a good way to like build up a a contact list as well. Like a lot of the fighters that I interviewed back in the day are now big name fighters like Jamal Hill, Sean O'Malley I interviewed before people knew anything about him, Mackenzie Dern, Curtis Blades, Corey Sandhagen. Like the list goes on, the fighters that back then nobody knew who they were and now they're household names. So I think there's definitely a benefit in doing that. So I would say, like, if you're looking to get into it, figure out what you want to do. So that's the interview side of things. If you want to do news, start your own site and start doing news. If you like doing video content and want to talk about news, start doing video interviews about the news, like give your takes on it. Like I would just say the biggest thing is start creating a portfolio of your content. And once you start building up that portfolio of stuff that you do, whether it's a YouTube channel, a website, whatever, then I would start pitching that to sites and saying, hey, do you guys need any extra people? I will say this, the number one job that people get hired for in this industry is news. So if you know how to write news, you're going to be ahead of everyone else. And particularly a lot of people, one of the things that I hear from a lot of site owners is that they want people doing play-by-play for regional cards. You don't know how tough it is sometimes when I'm trying to interview a regional fighter. I can't find a lot of play-by-play of their fight because people aren't doing it enough. It's a very valuable resource to know what's going on in the regional scene. So I would say if you like doing play-by-play, people like doing watch-alongs. I think more people should be doing watch-alongs of regional cards, like do an LFA watch-along. Like maybe there's someone who is fighting on that card. You would be interested to hear someone's take on that. You're not getting that the same way you would with the UFC card. So those are the big things. Is I would say start making content, find people that are good at what it is you want to do and reach out to them. Most people in this industry are pretty cool, and ask them to look over your work. Like I see far too often people post stuff on social media and say, what do you think? Well, you're asking the wrong people. Yeah. Like how would someone on social media know what's good and what isn't? Ask the people who have actually been there and been successful at it, get their feedback, and then you're at least going in the right direction. So those are some things that I would recommend if you're looking to start, how I would get into it. And I also have a video on my channel that talks about like the top 5 things I would recommend if you're just starting to get into covering the sport as well. So
yeah, no, definitely. That's huge. A lot of people need to hear it because when I first started, I kind of knew a little basis on what to do, but I was kind of struggling with like, I don't know if I want to make content on my phone. I don't know if this is going to look right. But the thing is, you got to start somewhere and you got to start figuring out the content. I'm very thankful that I was really cool with everyone at Rufus Sport and things of that nature, but it really helped me. And then when I was talking to my friend Brendan Allen, who now is an elite contender in the middleweight division now, and he's the one that has set me up with you. And I told Brendan, I was like, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I don't know if you know anybody, because we were just talking. He's like, I got a guy, his name's James Lynch, let's just reach out. Boom. And then I messaged you, and right away you were like, yeah, let's definitely talk, let's do that. And we actually got to meet in person, which was awesome back in New York. Sucks that everything happened in New York that time, but I mean, that just shows though, like you cannot be afraid to do it. Be
Yeah.
optimistic and just think to yourself, all right, if I really want this, I'm going to reach out to anybody, even if they read the DM and don't respond. At least I did the initiative and was trying to put it out there so they see that. So it can happen for anybody, because that's what happened to me too. Is it took me a little bit to get out of my comfort zone a little bit, but now I feel that, interviewing a lot of bigger fighters and just local fighters too. Local fighters are the ones that help me build a lot of confidence. It's not about getting to this threshold. I got to interview every UFC champion. And that's the thing people forget, is that a lot of these regional fighters are going to be those next stars. So build up before you get to that level, because once you get to the UFC level, 1FC, you're going to be interviewing those people and you're going to think, wow, I feel like I'm just talking to a normal somebody. Because at the end of the day, we're all the same people, right? So that's how I see it as. But where did you said you went to school for this, correct?
Yeah, I did.
Where
Yeah.
did you end up going to the college?
So in Canada, I went to Carleton University, which is in Ottawa. So I got a degree in communications, like media studies, and actually have a minor in political science as well. A lot of people don't know that. Big into politics, U.S. politics especially. And then I actually did 2 years of television broadcasting at a college in Ottawa called Algonquin, which is interesting because like I'm not from Ottawa, I'm from Vancouver, but I went to university in Ottawa because I got a scholarship. It's a long story, but I basically ended up in Ottawa, and then I didn't want to leave for a while because I liked staying there and I made a lot of friends, and they just happened to have a college there as well that was like more hands-on. So I got kind of the theory side of like media in university, and then I got like the technical side in college. So it was kind of the best of both worlds.
Okay, so would you, for people that are watching this that want to get started in it too, do you recommend they go to college, either get a journalism degree, or should they just go on their content right away and just start going at it? Like, what would be?
It depends what their situation is. If you have the money to go to university and do like a program where you are going to be a bit hands-on, I think that's important. But I also think that you can get in this industry with just volunteering. Like I did hours and hours of volunteering at like a local TV station here. Nowadays, like you can do a lot of what you want from home. Like the landscape is so different than when I started, because like there was still like TV was still a really viable industry, right? Like I've worked in television before at like television stations and all that stuff. But now everything's digital. There's so many resources online. Like you almost don't need to go to school, because I feel like if you go to school, you're going to be behind the 8 ball a little bit, right? Like everything now is like changing so quickly. There's tutorials on everything. Like a lot of like I make my own graphics and stuff too. Like I did learn like Photoshop when I was in high school and that, but now I've learned even more just from like YouTube tutorials. So I think a lot of what you need to do in this industry, you can learn just on YouTube. And I don't necessarily think you need a degree. The only thing I will say is that one thing where I think school is good is like kind of learning like the professionalism side. I'm still one of those old school like journalist guys that like, if I go to an event, I'm going to wear a suit. If I, if like those types of things, like don't take photos with fighters, like try and like be non-biased and all that stuff. Like those are things that I still value as in terms of my coverage. So.
Yeah, no, that's huge. That leads me to the next thing, is being non-biased, even when it comes to this, knowing any fighters and such. Because once a reporter once a fighter sees that you're kind of friends, I would say, with another fighter, they kind of look at you different. You ask for an interview, they might turn you down because they're like, well, that's my opponent that I'm about to fight, and you seem buddy with them. So it's just being like neutral, split down the middle, and be like, hey, yes, I know him or her, but I am a reporter and this is what I do for my job, and not looking to have it be, it's 50-50. That's why I always put down the middle. I'm like, anything can happen. Even if you think they're going to win, deep down, it's like anything can happen in the sport. So I think, like you said, being non-biased, not taking pictures with the fighters is so big. It's so tempting. Even now for me, I'm just like, when I was at the Anthony Pettis Fighting Championship last weekend, like obviously Nate Diaz was there and everything, and I'm just sitting there like, I don't, like, it's fine. Like Jake Shields, a lot of people weren't even saying hi to Jake Shields. I was like, you guys know who Jake Shields is, So, but again, that's the MMA landscape right now. But yeah, not taking pictures with anybody, if you're being a reporter and such, is so important. Just to keep it away from that and focus on what you need. Build the connection with them. Introduce who
Yeah.
you are. Tell them your site. Tell them, I would love to do an interview with you. Can I reach out to you, or do you have a card or anything like that? I'd love to reach out to you. That's really important.
Yeah.
So I would say with that for sure. One question I had too, this will be a little bit outside of this.
Whatever you want. Yeah, it's all good.
Mostly with MMA right now, there are so many things going on with who's the best pound for pound fighter right now. And I have come up with a Mount Rushmore, and I know mine. I'm curious to know who your Mount Rushmore is. Just the top four. Top five can get really tricky because there's someone that can always fit in that one fifth spot. I was wondering, what is your Mount Rushmore currently, or I should say of all time, for MMA?
Yeah, it's so I think, I mean, first off, these lists are very subjective and people have their own way of how they want to put it, but I'm very big on opposition, like who you fought and title defenses. Like one of the things that I think I put a big, like, so like as an example, like John Jones and George St. Pierre to me have to be on your Mount Rushmore for the simple fact that they have had years and years of title defenses, right? Where they were in danger a lot of times and they still ended up winning and they still ended up defending their titles. And I know John Jones there's all the steroid stuff and all that. I realize all that, but I don't think that, like, I don't know, like the John thing's a little bit interesting in particular. Let's just stick with George St. Pierre. George fought the who's who. I think he got very lucky in that fight with Johnny Walker that fight didn't go the other way. But overall, his career has been incredible in terms of who he's fought and the years he was so dominant. So I put that a bit ahead of someone like, say, Habib. I would put Habib on my list as well because he was extremely dominant. He never lost a fight. I don't think we'll ever see that again of someone being like that. But also Habib had how many years of title defenses? Not that many. And that's not his fault. Like, I understand him retiring and all that, and it's not like a slight on him. But that's where, like, I would have GSP like ahead of that. So I think you got to go John. I think you got to go George St. Pierre. I think you got to go Habib. I would put Fedor has to be on there, I think, in terms of heavyweights. Like, he was fighting guys on steroids and Pride and was still, making it look easy. So he's got to be on there. And then I'd go, like, this is where it gets tricky. Like, maybe you swap out Anderson Silva for Habib, because again, Silva, same thing, had years of title defenses. Like, I don't put too much stock into fighters that look bad at the end of their career. A lot of people wouldn't have Fedor on their list, but it's like just because of how he looked towards the end. But he could have just retired like he should have, and I don't think any of that matters. If people talk about Dan Henderson finishing him, well, if Dan Henderson fought the Fedor in like 2005, he's losing that fight, no questions asked, right? So that's kind of how I look at things a little bit differently. And so Anderson Silva's got to be on there. John Jones, George St. Pierre. Demetrius Johnson should be on there too for his body of work at flyweight. Like, he's had an incredible run. So I think, I don't know if I answered your question, but it's kind of those names are the ones that come to mind, unless there's anyone I'm missing. But what's your list compared to mine? Is there anyone I missed?
My list, first I'll start off with John. Yeah. Just even with the steroid allegation, everything, I put that to the side. Like I said, look at the title defenses. His resume is by far the best resume in MMA history. Who he went through during their peaks, no one I don't think ever will touch that again. It's just, he is just a gifted athlete, and he just his fighting IQ is so high. So I'd have John number one. George St. Pierre would be my number two. He easily was the best and most dominant welterweight of all time, holding two belts, welterweight and middleweight. Even though he did defend the middleweight, he had a good, but a lot of people will say now, well, he picked Bisping because Bisping was a better matchup for him. Yeah, I mean, for sure he was, because I think Robert Whittaker would have gave him a ton of problems. But George, in my opinion, if John went to beat Ciryl Gane, I would have George over John. But for John to move up to heavyweight and be that dominant, even though Ciryl Gane isn't the best grappler, it just proves how good that guy really is, regardless of any steroids or anything. And beating Daniel Cormier twice, I know one's a no contest, but still, it's insane. Number three, gotta go with Demetrius Johnson. That guy I think he is the most underrated fighter of all time. He does not get what he deserves at all. Yeah. That guy, just because he didn't want to go fight TJ Dillashaw at 135 because the UFC didn't want to pay him the money he wanted to, I mean, you got to look how many title defenses he has. he was clearing a division that was so new, but it's not his fault. He's clearing out all these contenders. Even if TJ would have came down, I still think Demetrius would have beat TJ. Clearly, as we saw with him going down to fight Cejudo. But then number 4, it's tough. It's tough to say, but I want to put Khabib in there, but I gotta put Jose Aldo. I think Jose Aldo, either Jose or Anderson, because Jose was on that 10-year unbeaten streak. Nobody could touch him. I mean, he had a close fight with Mark Hominick, but other than that, he was pretty much clearing everybody out, finishing guys left and right, especially in the WEC. But no, that would be mine. So John, George, Demetrius, and Jose Aldo would be my Rushmore for currently right now of all time. So yeah, it's a big thing. This is a whole discussion on itself that we could have in the future, definitely. So, but also my last question for you, James, is I know you've been doing MMA media for a while now. Is there one fighter who you haven't interviewed yet that you still would like to? Because I see you interviewing Colby Covington, Chris Cyborg, you got a show with, and doing a lot of stuff at the UFC events. Is there one fighter you're like, man, I want to interview him or her, and I need to do it now?
I'd love to. I've never had a chance to interview Ronda Rousey. I'd love to just like pick her brain. And I always want to know, like, if because I still believe this. I think this is something that a lot of people don't focus on enough. If Ronda Rousey had come after the Holly Holm fight and fought anyone else on that bantamweight roster other than Amanda Nunes, she probably wins and her career could have been completely different. Yeah. And I don't know. I know Dana sort of said that she wanted to fight for the title and all that, but like, who was around her at the time that made her want to get that type of a fight? Like, I've never seen a case like George St. Pierre, for example, when he lost to Matt Serra. It was a huge upset loss. He came back and he fought Koscheck. It was dangerous, but it also wasn't like a fight where I think people were like extremely worried. And it's not like Koscheck had like knockout power. That's how Serra knocked out GSP. He had the knockout power, right? He just like caught GSP and knocked him out and took him down. Like, if I always think like, what if Ronda had fought like Jessica Ai or fought like, I don't know, Miesha Tate again or something? Like, she probably wins those fights. So I would love to ask her, like, does that ever cross her mind, knowing that she probably would have, like, her career could have been, now maybe she doesn't go to WWE and all these other things, but I wonder if that's something she's ever thought about, that if she didn't, like, of all fighters to fight, she fights the one that is going down in history as maybe the best women's fighter of all time. Like, it's crazy, right? So
yeah. No, right after she got, I remember the talks of her wanting to box Floyd Mayweather. Right. And I was like, when people were saying that Ronda would beat Floyd Mayweather in a boxing fight, it's just no. But I get what you're saying though. She was so dominant as a women's fighter. Everyone thought that she would easily beat Chris Cyborg as well, Gina Carano, any of those girls that were there. But no, I would 100% agree with you. She is one of the, I would have liked to see her come back and fight someone else like Miesha or Jessica Ai or someone like that. That would be perfect. But no, that's really interesting, James. I appreciate you sharing that. But if you want, James, feel free to shout out like some of your social media platforms. We definitely want everyone to check out your stuff and subscribe, of course. So the floor is yours, man.
Well, thank you. First off, thank you for having me on. I totally forgot about that Brendan Allen thing. I don't know why. Like, I couldn't remember how we met, actually. And it's because it's been so long. Like, when was that? That would have been like 2016? Around
2016. I'll have to go back and look at the messages. Yeah.
You still have them. That's insane. No, but I'm just so glad that, like, we kept in touch and all that. So yeah, first off, thank you for having me back on. It's really awesome. And I'm so glad to hear that you're getting back involved in the space, because you do a great job. Like, even your editing and stuff, I always check it out and, definitely have a look at it. But yeah, for your audience out there, anyone watching right now, first and foremost, you ever have any questions about the industry? Anyone watching this, hit me up on social media. My DMs are open. That's one thing where I will answer questions any time of the day on media stuff, because I feel like there needs to be more resources out there for people looking to get in there. So more than happy to do that. And you can do that by following me on all my platforms at Lynch on Sports. That's LYNCH. That's Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, YouTube. Same thing. It's all pretty much the same handle there. So yeah, that's that's where you can find me. And nothing major coming up. Just that's where you can find all my content is on that channel. And thanks so much for having me on, Matt. It's always good talking to you, man. I appreciate it.
Yes, James, thank you again for joining me. And this is Matthew signing out with Life of a Prize Fighter. And we will see you guys soon. Have a good one.